I'm sort of proud to be an amateur, and my dad's always instilled that feeling, in the true sense of the word, it's a lover of something rather than an expert. So I'm not self-conscious, but if there are ways to be expressive that are in line with people's expectations, I'm happy to
well, I think it's really, I personally, and I think other people watching will have the same reaction. It's really refreshing to have just honest, organic conversation and not always be jumping into technical jargon. Say, tell people how you feel about the wine. Why shouldn't we say more often how it makes us feel? We look at music or art and a movie, and we talk about how it makes us feel. A wine it's a story in a bottle. So let that affect you. Mm-hmm. And I'll have some tidbits about, the vintage and, 2017 is a hot year, 2010's a cold year. Yet the 2010 almost seems riper than the 2017. I mean, just because we know some of the facts doesn't mean, the wine is a certain way.
And just to let you guys know, we are broadcasting right now. It looks like we have about 28 people in the audience as we're gathering. But
great. We're off to a good start.
Good. Everyone who's out there, welcome to our event. I'm happy to be part of it.
Yeah. No, this will be a fun little hour here. I think we're on for about an hour, right, Roman?
Whatever feels interesting. We don't want to overstay our welcome, but we're here to get into it. So if we can sustain an hour, I'll be impressed.
Yeah. Let's see.
And again, for everyone that's in the audience, we'll be looking at the Q&A. So if you have any questions for Roman or Chris, feel free to use that Q&A. And my name is Mike Savage. I'll just be kind of moderating the conversation. So I'll jump in with those questions if I can't answer it directly for you guys.
We've got several dozen blocks flowering at the vineyard, Roman. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the, Syrah tends to bud out and flower a little later than the other varieties, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's flowering now. And of course, having rain like we have today is not ideal in terms of the set, but it's also a pretty sturdy variety, so I'm not really too concerned. Mm-hmm. The important thing is that it doesn't get too cold. Cool is okay, but we really don't want to see frost coming in after this rain, and I don't see it predicted, so I think we're good.
It was pretty crisp yesterday, but not nearing frost temperature, but it was chilly out there.
Yeah. I think we're going to dodge this little bullet okay, and frankly, it's good to have some late spring rain just to, we don't really like to irrigate unless we really need to, and if we do, it's not till late in the summer, early fall. So late spring rain is welcome as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I just poured it a moment ago. I've yet to taste it. Better be good.
2017?
That's the 2010. This is the 2017. Smells good. It's fun. I'm looking at the bottles, and for people who know a little bit about the story of this wine, there's a little bug that appears on the label, and that's always a fun detail that I enjoy. People are always curious about it, and I will be happy to tell the story when we're kind of off and running on this little session. But I love secrets and little codes and things, and there's another secret that's part of the spirit of this wine, which is on the cork. It has a little slogan, which is a magic slogan from a Fellini movie, one of my favorites. So these are all the little details that, make it personal to me and make it, make me have a special connection to it.
Yeah, I think, Roman, we just have 3, 4, 5 minutes maybe before we really get underway. Just hoping to get a few more people signed on. But at 10
so I got to save all my good stories for 2 or 3 minutes from now.
Well, unless you want to tell them again.
No, I'm happy to. And as we go about this, Mike is there looking at the interface, and I'm very happy to take questions and make this a banter amongst all of us. So, we're going to just be chatting and drinking and tasting and commenting, but I'm very happy to answer questions or share whatever anecdotes that people might be curious about.
And Roman, someone's already put on the magic phrase into the question, the Q&A of Asa isi masa.
Yes. Good. Well, so I'll wait till we're really officially a go, and then I can tell the story of why that is.
And so I'm going to start just a little bit of the slides. I know we are missing a lot of the guests at the Chateau, so love to kind of recenter everyone back to our Chateau. Looking for that time to kind of get our setting for, of course, how beautiful the wines are from the estate. And as we let people kind of get the last minute, it looks like we're about up to 53 attendees already. So,
Hey, Mike, somebody's asking when the Chateau might be open for visitors again. We're thinking like.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we don't know. The whole safety of everybody, guest, staff, is a question we just don't have an answer to. We're trying to figure out ways to kind of, again, bring people as close as we can. These virtual encounters really are great for us, but it's a hard answer for us because we just don't have that kind of answers yet. But we are making every plan we can, so as soon as we can get going, we will safely work with our plans.
No, you guys have, I've been impressed by some of the early planning here about safe ways to do limited tastings for small groups and, rigorous cleaning in between and ways to make it a very safe experience as we transition into that, that awkward time of starting up again. But I've been impressed by how the preparation you guys are making, again, not knowing when that date's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes time, we'll hit the ground running, I think.
Well, luckily, we've always aspired to have a premium experience, so it's never been a place that has intended to sponsor crowds and a lot of people. So in a way, it serves our goals to have it be more intimate and private and catering to really true aficionados and passionate wine people, rather than tourists looking for a novel experience, but to be the home base for people who are passionately lovers of wine.
And so kind of, I think we're getting to that point. There was a great Q&A to start. Someone was asking about the history of Engelmann since Coppola owned it. I'm not sure, Roman, if you want to put your perspective on that aspect, because I don't think that's an area people get to hear that frequently.
Yeah, I'll give it a quick rundown because a lot of it's public knowledge, and even on some of our labels, we've told the story. But basically, my dad bought this place around 75, 76 maybe. It was right during the era of Apocalypse Now being filmed. We went away to the Philippines, but we'd been living in San Francisco, and he had originally hoped to find a little country spot for our family as a weekend getaway. And the story goes, my dad's told it over the years, that they, they had a broker who said, oh, here's a little cabin and an acre or two of wine and so on. And by the way, this incredible Niebaum estate is for sale. It's not what you're looking for, and way out of your price range and so on. It's a very big estate, but are you curious? And naturally, being who he is, so yeah, well, I'm curious to see it. So anyway, it was not what they intended, a little country getaway, but this is an incredible estate. Now, at that time, the Engelmann Chateau had been sold and was being run by, I think, Ublind at the time. And so it was just the captain's mansion and a bunch of acreage, and then, of course, the back property, which is up to Mount St. John. So anyway, when they saw it, my parents, it was remarkable, and my dad said, well, we have to try for this, and they made a bid at this auction, I suppose, and then it turned out that they lost it. They lost the bid. So someone else got it, and some time passed, and the people who bought it weren't able to, there were developers that were intending to make some home sites, 60 home sites or something on the mountain. Luckily, that did not come to pass, and so it got put up on the market again. And at that time, my dad was, knew what it was or had a connection to it, and swooped down and was able to get it. So anyway, we lived here. We moved here in 77 or so. I went to school in St. Helena, and my sister grew up here. My brother and I, this is our home from that point on. And that was the beginning of it. Of course, we didn't have the Engelmann name. We didn't have the Engelmann Chateau. So we made wine under the name Coppola, and people who know our story know that wine. It's a precursor to Inglenook. It was the same traditions, the same vineyards, and a sense of quality. Then in it was 95, I think, around that time, maybe 94, I can't recall exactly. My dad was able to buy the front property, which is the Chateau and the other vineyards that were part of it, and basically was able to restore the entire property as it had been under Gustav Niebaum and John Daniels and all that great tradition and history, and had everything except it didn't have the name. The name had been sold off, and people also know this, but it was a kind of a jug wine, and not particularly. It was kind of a bit trashed. That brand from being the highest of the high to just being an ordinary thing. So then a group of years later, I'm not sure how long it's been now, maybe 7 or 8 years, 6, 7, 8 years, my dad was able to buy the name. And for him, that sort of completed this whole kind of project of restoring the integrity and this thing that had been broken apart, all the land, the home, and now the name. And so we're very proud of that. And our emphasis has been on quality, and just doing things in the most fine way. And there's a new facility that's being constructed that will be even one further tool to be able to make wine at the highest level of quality. And so that's our path, and that's a quick story of the Inglenook story in our generation.
But I think it speaks of your dad's vision. I think if I'd had the money, and it took actually 36 years from the time frame of your story that you just told us, about 36 years. If I had 36 years and a pocket full of money, I don't know if I'd have the perseverance, the patience, the vision to carry that out. But it speaks pretty highly of your dad and mom and dad, and how your whole family, how you made this thing come true and put it all back together.
Well, it's our home, so it's that's part of it. It's not a business enterprise really, and I think all we know from the history of other great wineries across the world, especially in France. These are multi-generational families and endeavors, and when we talk with the vineyard managers, the winemaker, and so on about what we're doing. They're talking in terms of dozens of years at a time, leaping ahead and imagining how things are going to be replanted or shaped, many years from now. So it's an interesting type of endeavor. And nowadays, everything's so fast and immediate. And I think a family business is the only kind of business that has that ability to sustain all those years, because otherwise, some stockholders, they want a return, but with a family, my dad's doing things for his grandkids and even their kids. So it's a different type of situation.
Well, it's personal. It's family. It's you take it personally.
Can we try the wine now, or what? What are we doing here?
I was just about to say, it's getting to that thirsty time. So as we're kind of trying the wine, I know there's questions, Roman, that people would love to hear the history of the bug on the label. So can you kind of get into the origin of the Syrah? I'm sure you could take a sip, but.
Yeah, well, let me take a sip so I can be reminded. This is the 2010. And the 17. It's really interesting, the expanse of time that between these two glasses, those 7 years, you can really sense the development of the 2010.
Before we really, get into the tasting of those two wines, could you maybe, Roman, just, I think it's a compelling question. Why Syrah? I mean, presumably you could be making a whole bunch of different wines, but why did you decide to make? And this was 2000 was the first vintage.
It was, yeah. Well, I'll give you the story of how it came to be. We had some Syrah that was grown here. I didn't instigate the planting of it, but it was part of our portfolio of varietals. And I can't remember my introduction to it, but I liked it just on a gut level. And I also became, I came to enjoy Penfolds and the Shiraz that they make, and that kind of Australian attitude of the Syrah, in which I, to me, has a kind of a boldness and this ballsy kind of quality. And so when I was invited to, my dad and the winemaker said, oh, is there a way that you want to participate? And I thought, oh, well, I would enjoy supervising a Syrah project or wine, because I just kind of had a yen for it. And also I like things that are a little different, so, it's fun to have something, a project that's just slightly different than the custom. So we know that we're in this great, Cabernet terroir, but there's something appealing to me about zagging when people are zigging. And I just was drawn to it, just an intuitive thing. So I liked the Syrah, and the year was 2000, and I said, oh, well, this is perfect. I'm going to turn 40 in 2005, and so I'll make a wine for my 40th birthday. So that was sort of the impetus, and I thought, oh, it'll age adequately, and I'll be able to enjoy a big format bottle on my 40th birthday. So in 2000, we started to make it, and it was pretty limited production, 300 or 400 cases tops, and it was really just more of a, sort of a hobby. And I thought it was suited, there's a kind of a style of cuisine that I enjoy, steaks and chops. And there's a type of restaurant that I particularly enjoy, like the 21 Club in New York City. And there's a place called Gibson's in Chicago, and Musso and Frank in LA, and, Tadich Grill in San Francisco. This kind of classic steakhouse, chop house, and with this kind of refinement, because it's food prepared with a lot of care, but at the same time has a kind of informal, noisy quality. And to me, that's kind of the personality of the wine. It's tasty. It's kind of has a boldness and a bigness, and but it's classy too. Maybe from its provenance of being here. So anyway, those are just all some characteristics. And we initiated making the wine, and I guided it to the degree I was able to. The winemakers are the responsible, but I was in the lucky position where they would present things for me, and I would just use my intuitive sense, like, God, this has that feeling. And I would just follow my nose in a kind of unprescriptive way, just kind of whatever felt right about it was what I wanted to pursue, rather than imposing anything. And that was sort of the tradition of how we started. And I just used my intuitive sense of what felt right. And we made that first vintage, 2000, and I celebrated by having this big, large format bottle on my birthday, which we still have. And incidentally, I just had my birthday, and I think we had a 2007, I can't remember, but we had this beautiful 6-liter bottle in the garden with my family here in the shelter in place. So it's been a very personal thing to me that I associate with celebrations and going to the restaurants that I particularly enjoy. And that's sort of the story. The other aspect is the sort of look and feel, and there's the way the label is designed has some curious little details. It has this kind of perforation around the edge, and it also has the little bug, which is sort of our curious quirk. And so it has a lot of things that I resonate with.
Yeah, I think Syrah, I love Syrah as a variety. I wouldn't have expressed it quite in the same way, but it's a variety that can have pedigree. I think in the Northern Rhone, I think of Hermitage, Côte Rôtie, Cornas. Certainly, I've been to the Grange vineyards in Australia, and I can appreciate that it can be a wine with great pedigree, but it's not complicated. To your point, I mean, I think, yeah, this is a juicy, expressive wine that is built for pleasure. And after all, what's wine for but for pleasure?
Yeah, I agree. It has and also it's special. It's not. It has its it's different from the pack, you know, and I like that about it. It has its own, you know, unique quality. It's unique.
You want to talk for a minute just about the vintages briefly?
Sure.
What's interesting, I wish everyone who was listening had, and it's nice to have so many people participating today. We really feel privileged to welcome. And also I'd like to just say that I hope everyone's well, and that's really the primary thing here to remember. I don't know, it's about connecting with these wines today, but it feels really good to me, I'm sure to you, Roman, just to connect with each other over this kind of surreal venue, but nonetheless, we are connecting. And so I really appreciate that. And that's what wine does, it brings us together.
Absolutely.
So Roman and I have 2010 and 2017 in front of us. Again, wish we could share with everyone, but soon enough we will be able to. 2010 was they said it was the coldest vintage in 30 years or so, and so since like 1970, and a rainy, wet, very wet fall, cold year. But nonetheless, this wine is it must have been very ripe, because it actually has a slightly higher alcohol than the 2017, which is a hot year. But I find it's very structured. I bet it was a big wine, Roman. Maybe you remember as a young wine. I bet it was pretty big. But it looks so useful today. I mean, I'm really fascinated. I think if I was tasting this blind, I would give it another 3 or 4 years easy. Thinking it was a 2014, 2015 even. Really youthful. 2017, it's also got some of these what I call classic varietal Syrah varietal characters. There's for me a little bit of in both of the wines, a little less in 17, but now that I'm swirling in my glass, there's more of it. Kind of this a little bit of a smoky bacon fat character. And this thing I was talking about last time we talked, Roman, this garrigue, it's like kind of that underbrush, the rosemary, the thyme. I've been hiking up on Mount St. John behind the house where you grew up, and there's some of that underbrush, that all those wild herbs that grow there. I get a little bit of that, and it's some gaminess. And I think that's part of what makes Syrah an exciting thing to smell and to drink. I don't know if you're picking up some of those characters. What do you think?
Yeah, it's funny. I just hiked on that trail up to the top of, not Mount St. John exactly, but to the top of that ridge. And it was just up there. And so it is a very sensual recall, the kind of brush that you're stepping on.
There's the bay leaves and not that it's exactly the same thing, but there's bay up there. There's all kinds of, I don't know, I just kind of that forest floor, because that's a forest on the mountain. That just sort of translates to this wine to me. I don't know if it's because of the proximity of that mountain, but so 17 hot year, it has a lot of freshness, For a hot year, you would expect that it would be a little flatter, a little less exuberant, a little less vibrant. But I find the 17 extremely vibrant.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And also you sort of mentioned, but there's an earthiness, and there's a kind of a green characteristic, a kind of the stems and the sort of,
well, that's another character of a classic Syrah, is a little bit of a savory character. Mm-hmm. It's not, in this case, it's not a defect. It's just a part of the identity, sort of the DNA of a Syrah grape. And that savoriness is one thing that makes it go so well with food, too, I think.
And I am just putting up for everybody a quick little fact sheet about the 2017 vintage, the blend, those elements for everyone to see. And just to let you guys know, that was just released. We released it on Roman's birthday, which unfortunately with this year was during a closed time. So it became our member shipments, which leads me into a question, I guess. Chris, if you want to answer it, someone's asking exactly how many bottles do we produce and do we distribute to restaurants? I can handle the second half of that.
Well, yeah, 20, of course, we're out in restaurants. A lot of the wine is sold through our wine club and visitors to the Chateau, but by all means, it actually goes to a lot of restaurants in the country and retail, a little bit in retail. But 2010, there were about 1,500 cases made. And 2017, we made just under 1,200 cases. So it's a pretty good supply. It's not nearly as much production as we have for our Cabernet-based wines, but yeah.
And if I can, just to clarify, the Syrah, we don't produce a lot to the property. So there are a few restaurants that do get that in distribution, but it is a rarity to find in the market just because we don't produce a lot of it. It's a very special.
Well, Mike, you know better than me. So.
That one I know.
Yeah. Yeah, was there another question you had, Mike?
I think you covered it with the production for that wine, just how many bottles we produced. So
yeah, both wines, by the way, are 100% Syrah. There's nothing blended in. They both had about 30% new oak. So it's really, what we're really seeing here is a vintage variation. The wines are a little bit different. They have some commonalities, but they're made in essentially the same way. And they come from the two same small blocks on our vineyard, one near the front gate and one near the back gate. So.
And Roman, just kind of tagging to this, we teased it earlier and the questions are coming in about the bug, the very infamous imperfection. Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah. Mention for those who were here with us, I love secrets and little illusions, and this is kind of a trompe-l'oeil type of thing. But for those who are fans, that we have the bug that appears in a different place in the label depending on the year. And to me, the story is that as a kid, we had these dinner service plates that were kind of our nice plates for Christmas or Thanksgiving. Guests coming over, and the decoration on the plates are these butterflies and wildflowers, and there are these little bugs, like little kind of, not a cockroach because that sounds very unappetizing, but like a little kind of beetle-y bug that appear on these plates, and it's just part of that design of that dinner service. And as a kid, it's just kind of fun and funny. You're eating your salad, and there's a little bug on the side of the plate, and it just always, gave me that little thrill of delight, and it was just an intriguing, curious thing. So it occurred to me that for this label that's pretty plain, that to have this little detail was a cue, again, to make it personal to me. So when I see the bottle, it makes me smile and it resonates. And, it just brings that little touch of playfulness that's part of my personality and part of, what I want to bring across.
So the bug is not in the same place every year, right?
No, it changes. It's never been in the same place twice, vintage after vintage. So if you're really a hardcore fan, you could say, oh yeah, 2008, the bug's in the bottom left corner, but I don't think anyone's quite that crazy.
And then what about the cork?
Well, the cork has another little kind of novel story, which is, there's a little slogan that says "Asa Nisi Masa," and for those who are fans of Fellini movies, they might recognize it. That's a slogan or a little magical phrase that's uttered in 8½, which is, Fellini made many masterpieces, so it's one of his masterpieces. And it's a magic word that these kids say, and I came to learn that it was anima, which means soul, but in Pig Latin. So you say asa nisi masa for anima, which means soul. And so it has a lot of layers of interest to me. I love Fellini, and the way it's used in the film evokes a sense of magic, and that it has this Italian heritage, and the fact that it's kind of coded with Pig Latin. It just has a lot of things that I resonate with, and I thought, if this wine is going to be kind of a reflection of something that interests me, those little details put that charge of personality in that I like. So when I go to a restaurant and I order it, I take out the cork and I can show you know, my guests or the wine steward, and just it's a conversation starter, and I feel like life is it's so important to have these kind of playful touches, and that's kind of my effort in that direction.
We have someone asking about a couple of winemaking questions, if you don't mind, Roman.
Take it away.
Fermentation is done in stainless, and we age the wine in barrels. And 2010 was French and American, and by 2017 we'd moved to just French oak, deciding with you, Roman, that we just liked a little bit better the marriage of the French oak and the Syrah. And then there was another question. There were different winemakers in 2010 and 2017. What effect might have that had on the style? The 2010 is, as I said, it's pretty ripe for a cold vintage like 2010, but I don't think it's unreasonably ripe. And I think for me, and this is true of a lot of the wines at Inglenook as they age, I think even though we've gone through a few winemakers over the many years that Inglenook has existed, the identity of the estate kind of surpasses in time the hand of the winemaker. So I think in this case, it's pretty clear to me. Roman, your opinion would be interesting. Don't you think you can see more commonalities than differences between these two vintages?
I do, you know, and it's hard to say because I've worked, you know, with the different winemakers over the time. It hasn't been so many, but you know, to me, the directive was always like it should be what it is supposed to be. I mean, what's there to support that. And whenever there was a choice to do something that kind of alcohol, well, it's another question, but sometimes there would be some comment like, oh, this high alcohol, or oh, this or that. I never wished to listen to that. That meaning more from the sales team or other outside energy. To me, it was like, what's there? What's its attribute that we got to follow that lead? So I never wish to use our brain power. Like, oh, maybe if we do this strategy or this trick, we can balance it in this way to achieve this goal or whatever. To me, the director was asking, what is it, and how can we support that? And you know, the blending was always very judicious. We'd have like 1% Petit Verdot or some little nuanced thing to kind of to help balance it. But it was always like, what is it? Let's support that. And I think, you know, that was always my contribution with the winemakers. Like, we're not going to get tricky or try to shape it. We're just going to let it be. And that was always, I felt, you know, was heard. And so I do think the wines share a similarity, and when they vary, it's due to that vintage or some unique characteristic that's just kind of ingrained in it. And I celebrate that. It's fun to have those differences over the years, you know, due to weather or you know, heat, moisture, whatever.
Hey, Roman, someone is drinking the 2007 right now. Actually, they're amazed that you mentioned it. Do you have any memories of that vintage in particular?
You know, I wish I had that type of callback, but I did have it for my birthday. And you know, I looked at this list. I said, oh, I want to have a nice big, you know, large format bottle. And so I discussed it with the team, and they said, oh, well, you know, do the 2007. So that was the pick. And I was happy it was, because we enjoyed it. And so, again, it's hard to sort of quantify the characteristic, but it was a favored one, and it was a great experience drinking it for my birthday. And it felt like the age was just kind of just right. I remember my mom remarked, like, wow, it's such a privilege to be able to, you know, enjoy a wine that has, you know, that kind of age that is here in our cellar and something we made. So yeah, it was I think a very nice vintage for many reasons.
Someone comments that the description of the tasting notes mentions highly fragmented yet elegant. I'm not sure about the mention of fragmentation, but you know, as far as distinguishing between different flavors, I think both of these wines have. I mean, if you want to throw out some adjectives, I've got, you know, blackberry, I've got blueberry. I mentioned, kind of a bacon smoked bacon. But that savory thing that you talked about, Roman, I get kind of rosemary and sage, maybe a little fennel maybe. Fennel grows up on the mountain behind the winery too. It's kind of a brambly character, especially, well, both wines have kind of a brambly character, sort of that blackberry bramble.
Yeah, blackberry has always been a term that has come to mind, of just that kind of jammy blackberry. We have blackberries here on the property, so again, it feels like part of its heritage. How would you characterize the age? So we have 7 years between these two. What is that 7 years kind of coming? How's that coming across to you, Chris?
I know there's about 7 years between you and me. How does that affect us? I think the 2010 is very youthful. I'm really amazed at that. The 2017 took a little bit of time to open, but now it's very giving, very generous. It's also got some red fruits. I think the 2017 has both black and red fruits. Kind of a ripe raspberry, ripe strawberry. But someone's also asking more about food pairing, but I think you kind of addressed that, Roman. I would also say sausage, and I make a lot of pizza, and I like to put kind of some spicy sausage on the pizza. Goes really well with this wine.
For me, and maybe it's just my own bias, but I love lamb chops, especially a French cut lamb chop, which is the kind of double rib cut. And there's a great restaurant in LA, one of my favorites, Musso and Frank. And that's, to me, in one of my birthday parties where we celebrated RC, we had the French cut lamb chops, and that I associate with it. And, steaks. And for my birthday, we got some lobsters, some steaks. We had surf and turf, and it fit right in with that. So that kind of hearty, juicy food, I feel like it's a great companion. You mentioned sausages. That sounds good. I'm hungry right now.
Someone's asking what the best time for drinking 2017 is. It was a wine that we just released on your birthday. I don't know. I have sort of a pat answer for that. The style of wine that we make at Inglenook is meant to, and this is something I learned in Bordeaux. And I think if you're making wines, if you're growing the grapes and making the wines in a balanced and way, and you're really attuned to making something that's going to be elegant and nuanced, and not just a more is better approach, but you want to introduce complexity, and you want to have good texture, but you don't want to bang people on the head. I think, and it sounds very cliche, but that the wine is great out of the barrel the day before you bottle it. It's good after you bottle it, and it's going to be good for a number of years. So the 2017, I'm quite amazed at how nicely it is showing today. Will it improve? Yeah, it's probably going to continue to improve and reach an optimum drinkability in the next 5 years, but it will be on a plateau. I mean, if the 2010 is any gauge, it will be on a plateau for the next 10 to 20 years easily. So that's my feeling.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it very much. Like, there's nothing deficient. Like, I wish
someone else is drinking 2014 and 2017. Bravo.
Good.
Bravo. How about the edge of the label, sort of that sheer, how'd you come up with that? Someone wants to know.
That was that's like a perforation that you might see with the stamp. And I actually saw that when I was just learning about Penfolds Grange. One of their, I saw in a book or article or something, they had these labels that were sort of their laboratory labels where they would slap on to indicate, some, it wasn't facing the customer, which is kind of a mock-up label that obviously, must have had a gummy background, backing with a perforated edge. And I thought that was kind of cool. And I'd never seen it before. And so we incorporated that, and it kind of has the, it feels like a stamp, which has a certain appeal. And one thing, it's kind of a little, maybe a dumb story, but there was a few years back, there was a cost review, and we're looking at the glass, and we're looking at the foil, and you have to do these things once in a while. And there was a paper that was kind of coated with something, or vinyl, not paper. It's like, oh, we can save, X amount of money if we do this paper with this printer. And I was kind of suspicious, but anyway, I didn't want to be a snob, say, hey, we can save some money. We don't want to be wasteful. Anyway, I did a little test where we let the wine sort of drip down the label, and it rolled right off the label, and it didn't, the paper didn't absorb. And I thought, oh my God, no way, we cannot compromise the paper that kind of absorbed the wine. So when I think of the label, I think of that. So these are the details that mean something to me, and I hope the folks out there that are interested, that it resonates with them, because this is what makes life enjoyable. All those little details that that you resonate with.
I think it's interesting that the wine obviously has, the Syrah has a lot of good texture, and so does the label. The label has texture.
Mm-hmm.
I think,
it has these kind of watermarks, something, and then of course the perforation.
Yeah, that's nice. Nice paper. Hey,
another thing, just to talk about the label, people are curious, but I want to be simple. So of course there's a lot of bare space, and I had to say, legally we have to state that government warning, all the Surgeon General stuff, and of course that's there for a reason. But I thought, normally people incorporate it into the label itself. And I said, no, let's just make our label. And then if we need to say that, because we're obliged for legal reasons, we change the font and we put it on as a separate label. And to me, that was sort of, again, a symbol that we're going to do what we want. And if we're obliged to do something, that's kind of an afterthought. It's not integrated. It doesn't mess up the thrust of what I thought was important. So that's, again, these are all the little details that add up to be the picture of what it is.
Someone else is drinking the 2016, asking about what that year was like. That year was a phenomenal year for making red wine in Napa in general, but specifically on the Inglenook estate. And I remember the Syrah harvest. It was, sometimes there's debate. Maybe we should pick one side of the vine and not the other, or it's a little more vigorous down there, let's pick that last. And it was like the easiest decision-making process in 2016. So it was just a natural progression, and the decision-making was so easy, which is one reason I think the wine turned out to have a great balance. I don't know if you'd like to hear this question, Roman, but if you'll indulge in a non-wine question, can you give any update on when the French dispatch will be released? Or is that secret stuff?
No, it's not secret. I'm not sure if it's totally certain. It was supposed to be July 24th or something, and of course that was delayed. And now I heard October 12th or something like that. It's probably posted online, but I think October is the proposed date. But everything is so uncertain now, no promises. But yeah, it's a fun movie, and I think folks are going to enjoy it.
Someone's asking about the blending in of Petite Syrah. So a lot of Syrah wines, and especially in California, have a little bit of Petite Syrah blended in. We've done that very occasionally, the 0.5%, the 1%, but it's only in vintages where the wine lacks a little bit of structure, because Petite Syrah is so massive. A little bit goes a long way. Most of the time we don't do that. Most of the time it's 100% Syrah, just like it is in these two wines today. So that's sort of the answer to that question. Someone's asking how many acres in a block. Well, we have, we're building a new winery at Inglenook, and we're going to have 120 tanks because we have 120 different growing areas on the property. And the size of the block varies from, sort of like a quarter of an acre up to, I don't know, what the biggest block is, maybe, 10 or 12 acres. So it's, there is no rhyme or reason. It's not arbitrary at all. It reflects the particular growing potential of that specific piece of soil on the estate. So it's a complicated question. I'd invite you to visit us, and we could take you out there and you could learn a lot more about that. What else can we talk about?
There's one other question that came through, and it's really one of those, it's for Roman directly because we have such a unique opportunity with him. Do you have any anecdotes about growing up on the estates? I know we have actually a grand nephew of Gustav Niebaum in the audience with Daniel Visna out there. But Roman, for you, do you have any anecdotes about, being on the property, making money with the family?
Yeah, what can I say? I mean, I can divulge that the room that I'm sitting in here, and you can see, it's sort of our, we have some wine bottles here now, but it's a space that has some cameras and some gear for our film activity. But this is part of the carriage house, which was the original winery that when I was a kid, we moved up here. We had we did our crush in '77. That was our first vintage. It was just very much a family wine. We got in the vats and squished the grapes with my brother, my sister and I, my grandparents. So, and this was the room that was the winery. Now, of course, that was before we had Engelnook and the sort of proper, the proper winery. And I see a photo has just come on. So that wall is the wall that's behind me, which is kind of fun. So,
Roman,
these are.
Who are you in this picture?
I'm there on the left side of the photo, kind of facing the camera more.
Doing a little berry sampling?
Yes, just a little, just making sure everything's okay, quality control. So yeah, as a kid, I had a little dirt bike and would roam all around, and that would be my way to get around, and sort of I became pretty, all the little paths and cutting through the vineyard, and to me, it's, this beautiful backyard that I was just remarking. I've been here for a few weeks. This is where our family is during this crisis, and this fig tree that's outside my residence was bare, and just over these weeks it's been just now proliferated with leaves, and the same with the vineyards that were just scraggly, and now there's all these little budding berries. And so I'm not sharing maybe a very specific anecdote, but the smells and the setting, and to see things unfolding and to see it through the eyes of my kids, because now I have 3 little kids of my own, and it's really a joy. So I love being here, and feel very blessed that I'm here.
Yeah. Someone is asking a question they overheard before we went live. I'd mentioned the word irrigation, and there is a movement in Napa to a lot of value put on the idea of dry farming and not irrigating. We use very little water for irrigation at Inglenook, and it's generally just in the very late summer and early fall if the vines are really stressed, because we know that the fruit will not, it's only when we are convinced the fruit will not mature adequately that we do that. And it's very little is required. And I think sometimes it's taken to an exaggerated, people put too much importance on it and think it's like you're compromising the quality of your fruit if you irrigate a little bit. And I'm not of that mind. And there's more science we could talk about another time, but, and then they ask what's, in France, people don't irrigate. Well, if you're in an AOC, it's against the law to irrigate, but it rains every month of the year. So there's reasons that they don't irrigate. So I think that's the short answer on that. with the Syrah that we grow, and this has been my experience with Syrah throughout my career, we really like to see, and Roman, you probably remember this, when the grapes are truly physiologically ripe, you see a little pucker. They call it a pucker in Australia, and but they start to shrivel, and that's a sign that the Syrah is just about ready. We don't like to harvest unless there's a little bit of shrivel, so we certainly would be loath to irrigate and not let the Syrah grapes shrivel. We don't like to see.
What is the sugar? What's the bricks when you tend to pick for the Syrah?
We pick Syrah between 24 and 25 bricks.
That's slightly higher than the custom for Cabernet, it seems, right?
Yes, just slightly higher than what we pick Cabernet at. Yeah. We like to get Cabernet in under 25 for sure. Sometimes the Syrah will go a little over 25. So, any other questions, Mike, or did you have something you wanted to ask?
Well, there's a question just coming in right now about our harvesting techniques. And Roman mentioned about texture, especially for the label. I personally will say that ever since 2013, the wines have taken on such a tremendous texture and dexterity to it. The flavors are so intricate, but they're not overwhelming. For me, it's always stood out. And I just kind of asked for a question for Roman. Is that something that you are looking for? I mean, it seems to, for me, projecting on you, part of your personality of being able to do so much, but not be overwhelming. Would that be fair?
Well, that's a tricky question. I mean, texture and intricacy, these are things that appeal to me. You know, I think, again, it's so hard to put words to it, but I'm pleased that we got that comment because that sounds very positive, and that the recent wines are unfolding in a positive way is wonderful. You know, it's hard for me to really take any credit or say, oh yeah, that's what I was thinking. You know, I'm very straightforward. I just want it to be what it is. And I think that any evolution or change is, you know, perhaps it's a winemaker influence or some other, you know, we've been at the winery since the beginning, but in recent times, my dad has put a very big emphasis on quality. What can we do to enhance the quality? That's what we want to do. And so there may be other measures that have happened since 2013 with some more sophisticated equipment or staffing that's more attentive in that way. But it's sort of happening around me, you know, and I'm supporting it and I'm loving it, and I just want it to be its full potential. And so hopefully that's an adequate answer, but I'm happy to hear that comment.
Well, yeah, and I would chime in for the winemaking team, but it's, you know, I think winemakers tend to get all the credit. You know, I made this wine or whatever the comment might be. It's always a team effort. And so I don't think any one person can really take credit for making a wine. We're lucky to have owners that are very, encourage us to really coax the best we can from the vineyard without being heavy-handed, and really encourage us to pursue quality. We don't sit on our hands. We're always looking for ways to refine our winemaking. 2013, we started picking into small boxes, hold, you know, about 35 pounds of grapes, and instead of half-ton bins. You know, that it's a tiny thing. It actually makes harvest a lot more complicated, but once you figure out how to do it, it becomes systematic. Little changes like that. I think there's 1,000 details that go into making a wine, and it's the sum of those 1,000 details that really result in what's in this bottle. And so a lot of them will put you to sleep were we to list them, but we're always seeking, like Roman and his family, always seeking for ways to enrich life and do what we do just a little bit better. So I think, you know, Roman, you guys bring out the best in us. Hopefully that's seen in the wine. You know, the wine, it's a story in a bottle, and we're getting to hear a little bit today about the story in this bottle. So. Roman, do you think any of your children are interested in winemaking?
They are. I make a little, 7 or 8 cases each year. Just, we have a little residence here that's off to the side, and we go out there, and we've done it since 2013, and we pick and we crush and we supervise it with a little help from the winery. Sometimes I'll need a little advice, but yes, we make our own wine, and my kids enjoy it. I grew up, around the sort of an Italian tradition, perhaps, but wine at the table is not, it's shared with the kids, and have a little splash of wine with some water in it. My dad as a kid, had some, soda, some 7-Up or whatever, and some wine. It was just kind of a custom, and we grew up around that. And I continue to do it with my kids, where they'll have a little water with wine, or my daughter is, 8 years old, has a little splash of wine, and it's very sweet because I asked her, it's funny because I was going to invite her to come here, and I thought, oh, we'll get in trouble if my daughter's tasting wine in this public forum. But I'll ask her, so what do you taste? And she goes, oh, it tastes strong, tastes great. I taste the grape. And it's just the beginning. Obviously, she's just defining her words and stuff, but she's very serious and kind of, and I invite her to taste it with a kind of intent and purpose. And anyway, she does. And so to answer your question, they're very young, but they're living here and enjoying it. And we're making wine, we're tasting wine, and we're part of the community here. So yeah, I have a lot of optimism that my kids will, continue to keep it going.
Yeah.
So we're kind of in the last time that we've set up. I know you guys are more than willing to take questions, but kind of as we're going back to the wines, I know that 17's just released. 10 is so unique. Do you guys have one, and why they stand out for you?
Well, I think I'm pretty entranced with the 2017 today, because again, I mentioned, maybe it was before we really went live today, that it's really vibrant. And it was a season where we had some hot spells scattered throughout the summer. One was not long before harvest, and I think it was because the way we reacted by adjusting our canopy. We had some shade cloth we actually used to protect the fruit, kind of some elaborate measures, but it really paid off, because I think this wine has, a good wine has tension, has, just this innate sort of, it's the vibrancy. And I think there's it's alive. And I think the 2017 just, it's not just because it's young, it has this sort of tension. I think, if you were sitting here at the same table, maybe we could understand each other. But so that's kind of that's what I'm gonna, as I'm going to sleep tonight, or maybe finishing this bottle with dinner. That's what I'm gonna be thinking about, is kind of that liveliness in the 2017. Roman, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, how do I put it into words? There's this blackberry flavor that we recognize, kind of the hallmark of Syrah and what we do. But there's a kind of a green flavor, and you mentioned this kind of brush and bay leaf and kind of herbal feeling that I'm taking in and enjoying. It has a freshness, it's it has a fullness. It's funny because I was thinking, geez, what am I going to do after this? I got to keep these bottles, and what am I having tonight? I feel like I want to eat a beautiful, lamb chop or steak or something, because it does, in my mind, there's a companion. The food component is a big companion of it. But yeah, I'm very proud of it, and it's very tasty, and you can tell that from our history that this will be something that we can enjoy for some time. This is going to be great over the years.
I know Chris mentioned it, and it's one of those things that's kind of a great theme for us. What is for dinner with your Syrah, Chris? And if Roman, you want to give that, and people always like to hear that.
Well,
You go first. I have to reflect on what my plan is. If
yeah,
it's more-
I've had this recipe on my sink for a couple of weeks now, but I finally have the ingredients. So I think I might have time to make it tonight, but it's a Basque dish called a piperade. Have you heard of that, Roman? It's got sweet peppers. It's got some it's got a tomato base. Yeah, I forget what the other spices are. It's got some well, it's got some special Basque pepper that I use. Comes in a granular form, but and I've had this in southern France, and you put it on meat. So clearly, I'm going to have to grill something tonight. I've got to see what we got.
Yeah.
So, but I think that this sauce would go really well with this wine because it has kind of a savory aspect, and could be a good match.
Yeah, I hadn't thought it through. I think tonight it would be something I would first think of to pair with RC Reserve, but I'm kind of unconventional, so maybe it'll be great. But I had this very nice whole chicken that I was thinking of making sort of a tangine, kind of a Moroccan tangine with a lot of cumin and olives and hot spices and stuff. And again, it wouldn't be the first thing I would think of, but I think this could go nicely with that. Kind of spicy couscous and tangine chicken.
But admittedly, both of these wines have gone pretty nicely without any food. I think.
I do like to interject with our guests. I mean, this wine really is a great conversation wine. You can sit down with somebody and have a conversation like we're doing. An hour can pass and the wines don't fade. They add complexity, much like a good conversation. It can grow with time. So with that, there's one other question before we kind of end our conversation, and I'm going to butcher this. Chris, are you able to see that? Is it the Montepulciano grape?
Oh,
question?
yeah, I saw that. That's an Italian variety, obviously, that I have never worked with. But I think the question was, what was the question exactly? Would we ever consider planting it at Engelmann? Is that the question?
Yeah, it's one of, do we have any plans for it? I know it's not a state wine that we have, but I'm unfamiliar with it completely.
Yeah, I think Francis would say no. Back in the day, there used to be Charbonneau at Engelmann, and I made the mistake of asking him if he'd ever want to make that again, and he only had one word, and it was no. But I think,
but I have a sense is thrust, and I think we are a great Cabernet estate in that tradition, and to have a little project like Syrah because it has it's quite good and it's personal to me is something I've had. And grapes that make a Blanc or white wine, but I think we are a Cabernet estate, and we have love for all the other varietals, but it's not something that makes sense to do here in this rough.
Yeah, I think I always say that Rubicon is really our raison d'être. It's the we're there to really make these beautiful wines from red border varieties that have for 150 years they've been flourishing at Engelmann, and they're going to continue flourishing. But as I said earlier, we really are a kind of a crucible of innovation along with the family, and we'll always be trying a little bit of something. We'll continue to evolve and continue to innovate, do what we do better, and Syrah is one of those little things. So.
And if I can too, I mean, the family's influence for the property, even before it, there is a term for the legacy of this estate. And as Chris mentioned, beyond the winemaker's hand, the estate shows through with time. And I really think that all the wines from the property have that timeless quality and can be judged on the long scale, not by fashion trends of today, but of what we see for tomorrow. And again, that's really comes from those that make the wine and those that steward the land. And that's really on our screen. We have two of those people right here with Roman Coppola and Chris Phelps with the winemaking. So with that, I do want to say thank you guys. And do you guys have any last words before we close it down?
No, again, just everyone stay well and Thank you for taking the time to join us today. It's been an honor and a privilege. Please stay well. And there's been questions too about when you'll be able to come and visit us, and will we have more virtual tastings? I think, you know, or someone asked, when are we going to be back to normal? Well, I think it's a little bit of a Rubicon moment, and I think we'll never be exactly like we were before. But maybe that's a good thing. And, you know, I hope that personally that a year or two from now, we'll be saying that we succeeded, not despite the pandemic, but because of it. We learned how to be more creative and flexible and communicate and connect in different ways. So I hope that comes to pass.
I agree. Well, thank you everyone who came to join us. Hopefully it was enjoyable, and we'll look forward to the next one.
And a lot of good comments have come through. So thank you guys for spending the time, and thank you for everyone that came to visit us. So until next time, thank you guys. And if you guys are interested in joining us, our website, www.engelnook.com, we'll have our announcements of when things change and as they progress. So please keep this in mind there.
Okay, cheers.
Bye, signing off.
Cheers.
See ya.
See you, Roman.